On average, it takes 6 months. Now, that needs a little bit of an explanation. The ships in this room, we have 5 rooms like this. The ships in this room are from the ancient world. And in the ancient world, the ships were simplistic compared to modern day ships. So these have taken only 2 to 4 months each to carve, the ones in this room. Now, in the next room, we have medieval ships. And so by the Middle Ages, the ship was a little more complex. They've taken a little bit longer. By the time you're in the last room, where the modern day sailing ships are, you're looking at ships that are still under sail, or some of them are still under sail. And these are complex ships that take up to 1.5 years each to make. I just finished a carving last week. It took me over 14 months. And the one I'm starting right now will take me at least that long. So the answer is they take 2 months to 1.5 years, and on average I make 2 a year. Now 2 a year adds up. I started this project when I was a senior in high school. That was 46 years ago for me. You guys all know how time flies. So I've been able to average 2 a year for 46 years, and that's how I have 92 carvings working on number 93. All the carvings are made from antique ivory. There's no exception to the rule. The rule is everything that's white is antique ivory, and that includes the string. The biggest question I get, how do you get string out of ivory? And I use one file and one type of sandpaper to work the ivory down to that size. But later on, when we're in the workshop area, I'll actually be able to show you how the strings are made. And once you see how I hold on to that while I work it, it'll make a lot more sense. It takes about an hour to make one of the longer strings. When ivory's that small, it's quite flexible. The curved ropes and the superstructures, they were straight. And I bend them with my fingers. I don't have to steam them or soak them or anything. At that size, I just bend them right around. I force the ends of the strings into little socket holes I've drilled with miniature drill bits, and those strings maintain that curve that we see here. And right here in Ohio, in fact, it's only about 50 miles from here, is a little factory. It's called the Ohio Drill Bit Company, a very original name. Over at Ohio Drill, they make drill bits down to the diameter of a human hair. And that's what that factory does. They make extreme miniature drill bits. They stock them on the shelf. When I buy them, I'm just another customer, one of many. They sell worldwide, and that's where I get my drill bits. Now, antique ivory is elephant tusk ivory. To work in ivory today, you work in the ivory that was brought into the nation years ago by collectors. Collectors were missionaries, big game hunters, oil field workers, military people working for the State Department. People brought elephant tusks back to the United States years ago. What worked for me was that these men and women did not bring these tusks back to sell them. They brought them back to have them in their homes. Well, these people share the same fate we all share. These people pass on, and they leave these things to their children. And being good children, they sell off everything they inherit. And so that's life on this planet. And so people inherit elephant tusks, and that's when they would be up for sale. I used to buy them. But then 15 years ago, we became a nonprofit organization. When we became a nonprofit organization, that's when these families started donating elephant tusks to us. So today we don't even look for them. These people find us mostly on website searches. They search out elephant tusks, they inherit these things, they look into it, and they find us and they call us up or they email us and they say, this is what we have. You guys want these things. And so that's how I'm able to continue to work with ivory. The bases are made from ebony wood. Ebony is still importable. It comes in from West Africa. I actually buy my ebony from an Amish sawmill 5 miles from here. So even though the wood comes in from halfway around the world, I buy it locally. When we see a beautiful wood like ebony, we picture a giant, majestic, beautiful tree. But no, the ebony tree is classified as a scrub tree. It looks like a crabapple tree. Inside that scrubby little tree is that beautiful black wood. Inlaid into the ebony is abalone seashell from California. And those are the 3 materials that I work with. Now, If I could have your attention, please. Thank you. I appreciate your quietude. As you look at the ships, you'll see little black lines making up planking and plating and designs and patterns. Later, doors and windows. The little black line work, this is known as scrimshaw. To do scrimshaw, I literally take a sewing needle and I score these lines in the highly polished ivory, and I rub India ink into the score lines. I apply the ink with a Q-tip, I wipe off the excess with a damp rag, we have a black line. If a deck looks like 20 planks, the deck is one piece of ivory with 19 score lines. Once all the lines are done, then I go in to do the gray and the black shaded areas, the cross beams on the decks, the checkerboard squares on the cabins. Anything that's gray or black is done by taking that same needle point, and now I'm in there poking little dots, and I'm filling the dots with ink. And that's called stippling. The line drawing is called scrimshaw. Now, you guys know about ships, a little bit about ancient ships. A cargo ship from the Nile River, 2,400 years before Christ was born. A passenger ship from the time of Moses. King Tut's royal yacht. That was Air Force One back in the day. That's how the king scooted around back then. The fourth ship with the horse head carved on the front, a Phoenician ship. The Phoenicians lived where the modern day country of Lebanon is. They thought ships looked really sharp if they had a horse head carved on the front, a swishing fishtail on the back. And so that's what a Phoenician ship would look like back at 850 BC. That was back in the time of Jonah in the Old Testament. attention again, please. The way I make the strings is something we get the most questions about here. The string idea was just a crazy idea that I had when I was a teenager, and the idea worked out, and I've been making strings ever since. I start by cutting up strips of ivory on a bandsaw. We call these strips square pieces of uncooked spaghetti. It's what they pretty much put you in the mind of. The tool is nothing more than a block of steel that has grooves in it, everything from large grooves to small. So I clamp this in a vise so it stays still. Both hands can work. I cradle the ivory into that groove. What I'm doing is I'm taking a file and vigorously filing over top that groove. The whole time that I'm working that file, I'm rotating the ivory with my other hand. The rolling and the filing makes the ivory round in a heartbeat. As soon as it's round, I start indexing that ivory into smaller and smaller and smaller grooves. Every time I do that, it sits up a little higher, I file more off. On this side of the block, I'm using files. When I turn the block over, and the strings are really getting pretty small at that point, I get into really tiny grooves where all I can do is very gently sweep the ivory with sandpaper. It is with sandpaper that I finally render out these little threads. As you can imagine, it takes time. It takes about an hour to make a string. The finished strings are very small. The finished strings are 7/1000ths of an inch in diameter. They really are this small. Ivory does something exceptionally well. Ivory reflects light, and under the bright lights, the strings look bigger. You get any string out of the light, it's just a hair of ivory. It is 7/1000ths. At 7/1000ths, this is the flexibility of ivory. Wow. It'll bend right around and give me a curved rope. I've done nothing to this little piece of ivory except make it small. I haven't steamed it or soaked it or treated it. That's natural. That's what ivory does at that size. When it's the size of uncooked spaghetti, it shatters just like uncooked spaghetti. But because of the size, you get flexibility. It'll bounce right back to being straight every time. What it doesn't have very much lengthwise strength. A little kink or a tug and it breaks. So it's very much like a blade of grass. A blade of grass is very flexible and pliable. But when you tug on it, there's nothing there. And that's the way ivory is. It lacks the lengthwise strength. Now, this idea of working in grooves is an ancient idea. It goes back thousands of years. On every continent where there are people, there are artisans and craftsmen working in grooves. And as we've studied those cultures, we've seen that they've been working in grooves for thousands of years. This is a very old idea. When I was 8 years old, my dad came into the workshop one day and he demonstrated and showed me how to work in the grooves. And then he gave me a little talk. He said, "David, this is how we make things round from square. You will cut your square stock on the bandsaw over there. You will make your square stock round working in these grooves." He went on to say, "This is how Grandpa made all of the pipe work on his steam engine carvings. And this is what you can use to make the mast and yard arms on your little ships." Now, I was a little boy at the time. My ships were little. For the first 2 years of ship carving, I had made all my mast and yard arms by gluing up matchsticks and toothpicks. My dad let me do that for a couple years. But he came in the workshop that day to specifically tell me that my matchstick days were over. It's time you make these parts. It's time you make them from scratch. And then he lowered the boom. No more matchsticks, no more toothpicks, and I'd better never see them around here ever again. And he walked out of the shop. It's like, oh my goodness, I've got to use these grooves to make those parts. So at age 8, I started using the grooves to make the mast and yard arms. Well, 5 years later, I was a teenager. You guys remember when you're a teenager, try to see what you can do and what you can get away with. I woke up one day and I said, wait a minute, I'm making big parts in big grooves. How small can we go with this crazy idea? if I got into really tiny grooves, and if I took my time, and if I was careful, I wonder if I could get string out of ivory. This was an experiment, and it worked out. I've been making string since I was 13. A friend made the steel block for me. When I was young, I just made these blocks out of wood, and I carved the grooves in with a chisel. Well, those grooves don't last long. The wood doesn't last long. So I designed a steel block. I made a drawing of this. I took it over to my neighbor's house. My neighbor and I were both juniors in high school, but he took shop class. I gave him that drawing, and 2 days later, he handed me this steel block. It took me 8 years to wear the block out in these little grooves. I couldn't get any more string off this block after. Yeah. I know a guy that's really good. Very involved in